This lecture is on how did the French Revolution impact Latin America. And the key to understand is that the force that was unleashed by the French Revolution was nationalism. And nationalism will go into the continent of Latin America and will ultimately lead to independence for the countries of Venezuela and Mexico. And those are the two countries that we're really going to focus on. Spain had dominated Latin America, and when they colonized Latin America, and they had been colonizing Latin America since about 1492, the most important group was the Peninsulares, and this is a term you'll have to know for your quiz. These are men who had been born in Spain, and since they had been born in Spain of royal blood, they actually could hold high office in Latin America. They're the leaders of the country, they're the generals, they're the admirals, they're the ones who control everything. And this is the way that it kept the loyalty of their colonial leaders, because you were born in that country. Now, a step below those Peninsulares are the Creoles, and these were Spaniards of Spanish blood who were born in Latin America. And when we talk about Latin America, we're talking about these countries right here. It's a French map, but I really like the colors of it, so I'm going to talk about it. You have Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, Paraguay, Brazil, Guyana, Argentina, Chile. And all these countries were controlled by Spain except Brazil. Brazil was controlled by Portugal. Now, if you're a Creole, you could not hold political office. You could be a very high-ranking military officer, you could be a captain, you could be a colonel, but you might not be the highest military officer. So these guys are frustrated with their attempts to take over the country. So they're ones who spearhead independence. And what that means is they're the leaders. Nationalism will spread from the French Revolution, will come to Latin America, and the Creoles, like the bourgeoisie in the French Revolution, really lead the independence movement. Now, below the Creoles, you have two groups. You have mestizos. Mestizos were people of mixed European and Indian ancestry. And then you have mulattoes, people of mixed European and African ancestry. And here's a picture, a very famous one, of a mulatto. He was painted by a very famous Spanish painter. So that gives you an idea of the groups. Now, these people were always below it. And then below them, you actually have the Native Americans. They were treated the worst. Okay, so you have the Creoles. Now, the most famous Creole is a guy by the name of Simón Bolívar. And he is the leader who ultimately led Venezuela. And he was actually a very famous world traveler. Actually, he traveled around the country, around the world, more than anybody else you can think of. He was in the U.S. in 1807. He visited England in 1810. But the most important thing that he saw was he was at the coronation of Napoleon. And he saw this. He was there when he saw Napoleon take the crown from the Pope's hand. And it was nationalism, that idea that your country, you have pride in your country is more important than anything else. And he was in Spain during the Peninsular War. And this motivated him to fight for independence in his country of Venezuela. So he's going to come back to Latin America, and he is going to fight against Spain. And he actually defeated the Spanish army in 1819, and this is going to create chaos in Latin America. Spain is kind of losing power more and more. It's always declining in power in the 19th century. And he has a very famous quote about Spain. He says, "Those who have worked for South American independence have plowed the sea." And what this means is when you plow something, you're planting it. So you take a metal piece of device, and then you go through the ground, and then you put the seeds in the hole that you create. But when you plow the seed's always going to fill back in. So he feels very frustrated by what happened in Latin America because it's going to descend into violence. One of the places that I like to talk about is Mexico. Mexico's independence movement from Spain was actually started by this guy. His name is Miguel Hidalgo. He was a priest from a small village of Dolores, and he had the cry of freedom from Dolores, the Grito de Dolores, and he announces that. He's the guy, he's an educated guy who actually kind of focuses people's attention on independence movement from Spain. And a few years later, Agustin de Iturbide, he actually leads Mexico in independence in 1821, and about that point, Mexico also had all the Central American states. And they're going to declare independence from Mexico in 1823. And this is kind of the cycle of violence and attacks that happens throughout Latin America, because all these places become nationalistic. And this is going to play a very important role in American politics in about 100 years when we talk about the Panama Canal. Also, we have a very complicated relationship with Mexico because when they declare independence, we get involved in that as well. So we're kind of setting you up next year for U.S. history and for our future units. Thank you. Bye.